Here. Mr. Geller?
Here.
Mr. Parker? Here.
As you wish, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What's your commission?
Dear Lord, please be with us today as we try to do what's best for the county. Keep us open minds. Keep us safe during the week. Please be with everybody when they head out in the bad weather this week coming up. Just keep us all safe. Thank you for what you've done for us in our lives, dear Lord. I ask this in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. We do have a last minute change in the agenda. I'd like to amend it. Add Timothy Wright's pay adjustment. It's on the end of our regular business. So, motion?
Yes, make that motion to amend the agenda to add Timothy Wright's pay adjustment.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. The consent agenda is pretty basic. It's, there it is. So, motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, regular business. Mr. Clerk, you want to talk about that?
I have no idea why the state requires that you all are supposed to approve the CPI index as presented by the state, and they sent it to us last year. Now, what most counties understand, use that as the basis for their preparing their future budget. What the CPI in the past 10 years, it's ranged from like 1 to like 3. This year it's at 7%, and that's on a trailing year. It's reported in January, but it's in December of year prior to the end of the year. And that's the 7% is what they say Missouri's CPI is.
And so we get the number months after we've done our budget.
That's correct. But we were very fortunate because when we started the budget this year, working with the auditor, if you remember, there was some choice whether we would continue the quarter 50 cent or try to actually do something substantial. And you all did something substantial, I think, for the employees. And unless something drops off quickly, because with the Fed saying last week that they're going to raise interest rates starting in March and apply at least 3 or 4 times, we are probably going to experience a like type thing. So we're going to have to prepare our budget and rebudget to try to address that. This next year, we talked about this before, we've done fixed amounts, which helps the lower paid. This year we did a percentage which helps the upper. Next year we may, if it's real high, go to a percentage to, again, or do a combination where we do a percentage and take half the amount that you own, and that's the auditor is going to have to. By this is trying to figure out what are we going to try to prepare for, because it looks like it's going to be high. We want to be fair to the employees, and then the auditor's challenge is to try to figure out how that makes it no compression of the pay. And the other thing is the state's raising minimum wage again next year, and so we have to take that. The problem with that is, and this is what I talked to a couple people they use this for. If you look at the minimum wage, if we've raised the minimum wage, and people who've been here a few years, if they only got a quarter raise, they might have 5, 6, 7 years experience and only make a quarter
Compression.
or 50 the compression.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to be a bigger challenge. But after that, they do this evaluation of the positions that we're going to have to figure out for next year's budget. But this is the basis that you have to then approve and say, yes, we realized last year's was 7%.
Okay, our working number was 5% though, but that's what we figured on. But anyway,
I think that was a pretty good guess, because if you would have said at this time last year when we started working on this that it's going to be 7% when it's been 1 to 2% for the last few years, at least we anticipated, the auditor department in particular, coming up the budget, anticipated pretty close to where it was. If we would have been giving a quarter raise last year, in last year's budget, we would have been very much behind.
okay, we need to act on this and get official approval of the 7.0 consumer price index. Do I have a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the consumer price index 7%.
Second?
I'll second.
Questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I think this time last year we were looking at Parks, might remember this better than me, but I think we were looking at CPI of like 2.4% or something like that.
2.1, 2.3, 2.4.
Yeah. And at that point we discussed it, took it to the clerk and said, we've got to look at something that's way ahead of this. And fortunately we came out on the right side of it this time. Next year, or this coming year, is gonna be a very difficult challenge.
Yeah. Okay.
Kevin, am I right, didn't the state, aren't they going for a 5.5?
They got a 2% seat starting in January because they did their budget last spring. And then they realized that they're not competitive at all, and they were low on the low scale 48. So they are currently working on a supplemental budget, which 16 years I was there, we never had pay increases in a supplemental budget of 5.5%. And then turning around in April and doing another, but next year's budget where they're gonna try to do a 5% to get them closer to where they're at. So they're gonna do what effectively in a 10-month period from now will be a 12% total raise, or 12 to 13%, depending on what the final. But yeah, that's, and I saw it, if you don't anticipate this, 08 or 09, we had to cut $1 billion and fire almost 10,000 people over a 2-year period. The adjustment, if you don't keep ahead of it and try to figure out where you're at, if it drops off, you've got to really change. If the inflation rate really goes high, and you've got to be competitive, it's going to, like Lou said, be a challenge for you all figuring out. And they can come up with several different scenarios of choices for you, but then at some point we have to get closer to figuring the budget. But I think they did a great job last year trying to anticipate. If anybody would have said last year when it came in at 2.3%, that next year's going to be 7%, I don't think anybody would believe it.
Now CPI is a federal number.
It is.
Wonder how local inflation compares to national inflation.
I read an article the other day, and they said that rural America has been more adversely affected by the gas prices because of the fact that in New York, you don't have a car. You're not paying $100 more a week in gas that a lot of our people that are driving to St. Louis. So that's been hard. The food, according to that, has not been that much. Building has been another area that's been up. Housing prices and rents. That if the rents nationally are up 40%, ours are not up that much. 40% on the increase in rents for, and a lot of the cities have a lot more rental units and buildings and that type of thing. So, but the things that we use, food, gas, utilities, natural gas futures were up 25% for March. So I used to follow the futures. That's something we all, natural gas, heating the homes and stuff, it goes up 25% next month. That will be
Any other questions, comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Waiving penalty and interest, Mr. Dugal, please. Notice that, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Eric Dugal, Assessor's Office, asking to waive interest and penalty in the amount of $315.96 for parcel number 7931604. And this was an error that was made by a previous mapper when processing the deed. The parcel was split when it should just been a name change on the entire parcel. As a result, the property owner's mortgage company paid the 2021 taxes, only which is the parent parcel. The mapping error has been corrected though for 2022.
So, cut to the chase, it's county fault.
Yes.
Okay,
Our office's fault.
okay. Motion?
I'll make a motion, we waive the penalty and interest for Mark Bacon and Audrey Seaton at $315.96.
Second?
I'll second that.
Question? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
And
Purchase- yes.
that's full to the county, just run
Purchasing policy review, John, you gonna talk about this?
Sure. John Gross, Highway Administrator. Commission, this request actually comes from several departments today. I know Road and Bridge, Sheriff's Department, and Maintenance are directly affected by this purchasing policy. Informal bid limit set at $500. I'm not really sure how it affects other departments, but we do on the regular make very significant purchases. So with the state changing the threshold from the 6,000 to 12,000 where certain things have to be bid out, we are asking or recommending that the purchasing policy for informal bids be changed from 500 $1,500. This is not a state statute. This was a recommendation by the independent auditor to the auditor's office so they could help track the expenditures up to $6,000, because those are not department alone, that is countywide. So we're asking if the policy could be changed from the $500 to the $1,500 informal bid amount.
And how long? It's been at 500?
Since the policy was started.
And John, would you ask this question?
Clarify, it's county policy, it's not state statute.
Right. This comes up many times for you, for Buck.
It does.
for
So
others.
what happens if we spend over that 500, but it is something that we need that day?
A chain
or
for
a spreader that's above $100. It
That
requires
applies to it, yeah.
Harold's emergency bid letter to be sent to the auditor's office, which I think in the last 3 or 4 weeks we've probably had 3 or 4 letters. So it's still going to happen when we set this at 1,500. We're just hoping it doesn't happen near as much.
Yeah. Back 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was writing 2 letters a year for emergency purposes, and now it's practically 1 a week.
That's correct.
So just because of this inflation of value of the goods.
Does the auditor's department have a stance on it should be 1,500, should be 1,000, or should it? You talked about this a couple months ago about how we're gonna have to address even like when you're out of town and per diems and that type thing, because have not been going up with inflation, but do you have this?
I have no objection, Your Honor. We have asked for this to be raised, the limit be raised over the last few months, and finally we have somebody taking it to the commission. The purpose for that emergency letter was because the independent auditor wanted to see why you were going past county policy. They needed an explanation. It didn't come from us, it came from our auditor. We have no recommendation, 1,000, 1,500. As indicated, with the rate of inflation, and as quickly as we're getting now supply chain charges added to invoices, it's easy to go above our threshold.
And that's a time killer too. You know, just like that chain they needed for the spreader truck.
Spreader truck.
Shredder truck.
Yeah.
You know, that, they need to get that thing ready for the road. Turned out the snowstorm didn't happen, but they didn't know that at the time.
It's just a snowball effect. I mean, the manpower's down depending on what vendors we're calling or what suppliers we're calling. So let's say the vendor for the snowplow chains is half of what it used to be. Well, it may take 3 or 4 hours to hear back from that vendor, so we'll know about a chain.
It kills their time too.
It kills our time, it kills our.
We can't wait.
Yeah.
You know, many times. we
Well,
cannot
another
wait.
thing too, if you got to get bids over $500, you run your welcome out with the vendor, you know, especially the ones that know they ain't gonna get the sale because they're hired.
Or
You
the
know,
time that
they
it
don't
takes.
wanna waste their time.
But by the rules, you have to call those people
We do.
to get several phone calls.
Yeah, and then it
correct.
takes time for us,
Yeah.
you know.
You may be up 2, 3, 4 hours depending on
Right.
what you're calling about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, and when you're waiting on that call back to get that price.
Well, this basically runs with road and bridge, the sheriff's department.
And maintenance. Now, I'm not sure about
Because
any
they're
other
constantly,
department,
yeah.
I don't think it affects any of the other officers really.
Well, one thing that you gotta watch for is, do you wind up buying from your buddy? And so you gotta watch that too, make sure that you're not missing this lower supplier there, but he's 2 miles farther away, or you don't like him as well as you like this guy, or.
Well, it did, Clay. I went over $4 last year when we first got here because I needed ink, and I went 504, and Amber got.
Oh, yeah.
So,
You're preaching to the choir, bro.
It does happen, and ink going up, and all kinds of stuff.
Everything's going up.
Yeah.
You know, just like a headlight assembly on them cars now are over $500.
Oh,
Really?
Tail light assembly's over $600, you know? Everything's over $500, a big ticket item.
Okay, I have a motion, and are we talking 1,500, is that the
Yeah.
number?
That's what we would like to see.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we raise the current purchasing policy for the county to $1,500.
On informal bids.
Yeah,
On
informal
informal
bids,
bids.
okay. And that leaves the, seal bid, all that the same.
Still leaves everything the same, it only changes the informal bid purchasing policy.
Okay.
Or purchasing.
And everything else is determined by state statute, which
Okay.
we adhere to.
Okay, I have a motion to increase the informal
second.
bid upper limit to $1,500. Have a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions, Tom? Yeah, Rich?
What is the difference between an informal bid and a formal bid?
Okay? An informal bid is if we need to purchase some, if a product is under $12,000, but now, if this is passed over 1,500, we go out and contact these local vendors, say how much for this, how much for this, and we get an informal bid from them right then, or within that day usually. A formal bid is if a item or a service is more than $12,000, then we post it in the paper with specifications, and it runs for 2 weeks, and they submit the bid.
It's gotta follow the
That's
state
a sealed
guidelines
bid.
on how
A sealed form.
they're sealed, and then it takes a couple weeks before they come in. We have to give them 2 weeks' time to put the bids in. We have to pay for the ad, then we have to open bids in public, and then we typically, so it's 3 weeks before they can buy a,
Spreader check.
yeah, whatever they would buy last week or want to buy, unless he
It
gets some
shortens the
emergency.
time, Rich, to fix
Up
something
until-
if it's broke.
Up until approximately 3 months ago, I believe it was, and this is by state statute, the amount was $6,000. Anything over $6,000, you had to have a formal sealed bid. The state raised that threshold to $12,000.
Like, it took effect in August.
Well, yeah.
August 20.
No business would buy like we have to.
No.
No business would do a sealed bid. But I tell people to keep me from buying trucks for my brother-in-law. Now, I got 2 brothers-in-law, neither want to sell trucks, I want to quickly state that. But that's the purpose of that, is to keep that all on the up and up. For
Now,
that
I
purpose.
do have one question. When you do the informal bids, and say we got something that's $1,000, and you do make the calls to find out what does somebody keep track of?
If we do an informal bid, we keep track of it, whether it's just a handwritten document.
I would hope if it's not a policy, we would do that, so that we could say
We
we
do.
called this parts company, and this parts company, and this parts company, and this was the part.
We always shop around for the cheapest.
Well, I know, but I would keep a record of that, just to keep the criticism from, like you said, you always do business with your brother or whatever. If we kept giving the informal bids what they were, so why we made the decision to go that would apply to you.
Copies of those are always sent in with the requisition.
Yeah.
And that's whoever does business that has things that are over $500, $1,000 deal.
Right.
I think it's just better if we call around and get bids like you would in a private business.
Yep.
Then we keep track of that, since it is a public.
Go for competitive pricing, no
Yep.
matter.
What we're spending.
I'm not saying you don't, I'm just saying it probably would be good practice to keep track of the other bids.
Well, I know that
as well.
Brian does that. Brian keeps notes of every supplier he calls and whether or not they answer the phone or call him back or whatever.
I would
And he
keep
keeps
those.
that, and
Now-
it goes with the bid.
Now, a lot of these are handwritten quotes. Some's done over the phone, but they are sent in with the requisitions.
I don't think that's a problem. I think the auditor would probably want some general, but the public, I think, perception, if you're just picking and choosing whatever you want, and you can go back and show them, no, we called and got these 4 bids, this was the best bid.
Right.
And so we did. I think that's better for the transparency.
Rich?
I'd like to call the question, please.
Yes.
Thank you. No, you're all done, let's vote on it.
Okay. We have motion second, and any other comment? Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank
Rich.
you, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, now, sometime back, we talked about a contract with Larry Goldberg Associates. He's an architect. He specializes in jail design. I don't know how you would get involved with that, but that's what he does.
Sorry.
And the minutes have showed that we hired Larry, but it didn't show that we approved the contract.
Well, we had a request for qualifications and we decided, you all decided that he was the most qualified you'd hire. But at that time, we didn't have a copy of the contract. You have a copy of the contract now, and
Okay.
as opposed to a bid, and you have the exacts, when it's just qualifications, and you say that's the most qualified, we want to do it, then you've got to approve the contract.
Okay, motion to approve the contract.
I'll make a motion that we approve the contracts for Larry Goldberg and Associates for the various build projects.
Second.
I'll second.
Question? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Here's our amended item. Corey's gonna just approach this.
Corey Schrum, Human Resources. Timothy Wright was hired in the prosecutor's office in August of last year. Melissa sent him an offer letter, and it was for $60,000 per year. He signed it. Whenever he came to work here and he signed the appointment order, whoever did the appointment order in the prosecutor's office didn't update the salary at the bottom. So we've been paying him $5,000 less than what he was promised.
Per year.
Per year annually.
Yeah.
And when he got his 1099, he said, this isn't what I'm supposed to be making. And the reason we bring it up, I hate bringing up things that aren't on the agenda, but we have a payroll due today. And if we're gonna correct this, what we advise is take the amount that we were short for that 4-month period of time, divide it over the I believe it's 22 pay periods, might be 23 if we get this one, but 20, whatever it is, divide it and pay it out this year so it stays in, and then, as you pointed out, he will get a pay reduction next January that we will make sure we explain to him, because
Go back to the
he will go
correct
back to
amount.
the correct amount.
Okay. So you recommend that we pass this correction amount?
Yes.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion we correct the pay rate correction for the Timothy Wright prosecutor attorney's office.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Thank you, Corey. Okay, next meeting is right here next week. Anxious to see you all back. Correspondence, I got a letter this morning, and Iron, Reynolds, and Wayne counties are now part of our local public defender's office. They're in District 42 while we're in, we're in 44. And part of that reason is we're the best ones, we have the best officers here than they have. So they're moving out of that area. That's mainly the Mark Twain forest area there, and they don't have much population there. So they're coming here. Also, part of the letter is that they're using the 2010 census, and that's good for us, because those other counties probably lost population, and we gained a little bit, so that would have bumped our percentage up. So that was probably a good thing that they did that. Okay, just correspondence, there's no action needed on that, just let you all know. Any other correspondence? Public comments? Departmental reports?
We're only working 2 days this week. We'll be off the rest of the week.
So how do we know the difference? Have you scheduled any bridge being built?
No, not with the weather.
No, but I bet when you take off, we'll know the difference, because our phone won't quit ringing. Why is
Any other departmental reports? Yes.
Just a couple things. 3 weeks from date, 2 things happen on the 22nd. The filing for August takes place, and the absentees for April starts the same day. The bid, if you have stuff for the annual bids, get them in. I know we're trying to do some wording. I talked to a couple of people yesterday to keep the prices. We're going to try to have the people hold it. If we put some other type of language in there to put some type of penalty or something like on it, we risk everybody jacking their bids up to make sure they cover the possible inflation that may take it. And normally that wouldn't be a problem, because if they think it's 2%, that's one thing. But if they think it may be 7 or 8 or 10%, then they're going to cover themselves pretty hard. So we will try to work that out. Last thing is, we've been having some trouble. Teresa is been doing payroll for a long time, and I've never seen her so frustrated in the past few weeks. I don't know if people don't want to get paid, or what, but the deadline's Monday to get your approval from your hours in. And every Wednesday, she's on the phone calling saying, are you gonna get this person's time in? You're not gonna get paid, you're not gonna get paid. A couple times we had to just not, we couldn't get in and not pay them, but they get upset at us. We're supposed to have it in Monday. Tuesday, okay, if it gets in the morning, but that stuff's all electronically processed by Dan and Teresa on Wednesday, and so that it can be in your at the close of business on Thursday. Just, I'm asking the supervisors and we gotta get these.
What he's saying is some of your people may not be paid if you don't get
That's
this done.
exactly. Oh, man.
To put it in blunt language.
I'm afraid that we're gonna have to do that a few times where people say, they're really not gonna pay us.
Dan?
I'd like to let you know that I've told my people, if you don't get your time in, you're not getting paid. And I've told the girls in your office, don't fight with them, don't call them, don't argue with them. If they don't send it in, they can do without for paper, they'll get it in the next
I've
time.
said the same thing. You gotta know Teresa though. She's like, if they don't get paid, they're gonna, they won't be.
She worries about it.
She worries about it. They won't be able to go to the grocery store and their money won't be there Thursday night. Some of them that have auto payments taken out the day after they get paid. Well, you know what? You just can't keep on doing
But
it.
when they get home and run into mama, they'll.
When they say there's a penalty, that's.
Okay, any other departmental reports?
I'll make a motion we adjourn.